Well, on debate number one on why Pakistan tried to provoke so desperately, why Sartaj Aziz made that comment yesterday, and why it was followed up with the official press release from the Pakistani side about how strongly Nawaz Sharif picked up on the whole issue of blaming India for breaking off the dialogue process with Pakistan when he met Ban Ki-moon. Joining us on our panel from from Karachi, we have General Rashid Qureshi, former spokesperson to General Pervez Musharraf. Good morning and good evening to you at the same time. Good morning from New York. From Washington, we have Michael Kugelman, who's with the Wilson Center. He's a senior program associate for South and Southeast Asia at the Wilson Center. He's there with Shuja Nawaz, who's a director, South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. Shuja Nawaz and Michael Kugelman, good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me this morning. With me in the studio is India's most trusted strategic affairs voice, Maruf Raza. Maruf, good morning. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Looking forward to your perspective. Let's see how things go this morning.
Right.
Not that the Pakistani surprises anymore, Maruf.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how to take that. You sound very world-weary when we mention the Pakistanis nowadays. Yeah. And with us also is Dr. Stephen Lebo. He's Professor of Modern International History and Politics at the Sage Colleges.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you for coming in this morning. With us from Mumbai, representing the Indian perspective also, is Mahesh Jetpalani, Senior Advocate. A strong view on Pakistan. Mahesh, good evening to you. Good evening to you, Mahesh. Well, let's begin with General Rashid Qureshi. You know, General Qureshi, this kind of provocation, now I find repeatedly out here. What we want to know is, why do you want to embarrass yourself? Why would you as a country want to embarrass yourself when you come to an international forum? The whole world is talking about how to take on terrorism. You should devote yourself right now to taking on the ISI, destroying the Haqqani network, taking on the Lashkar-e-Toiba, getting real about the fact that you're soon going to get encircled as India and America build a strategic relationship. But what do? You just come to Pakistan, New York, and you provoke for the third time. I can list out all the provocations. Now, why would you want to embarrass yourself, General Qureshi? I'll start the discussion with you after it's an open debate. General Qureshi.
Arnab, first of all, there's no embarrassment here. Let me give you my point of view. An unresolved issue between India and Pakistan, the largest problem that India and Pakistan face is the issue of Kashmir. You know it, I know it, the people of India know it, the people of Pakistan know it, and the United Nations General Assembly knows it. If that has been raised as the outstanding issue between these two countries, how can you call that an embarrassment at all? One. Number two, when the issue has not been resolved.
I asked you about the provocation. I asked you, sir, about why you need to provoke. You have provoked.
Each time.
So you provoked the Modi government 3 times.
You're supposed to be listening to my answer and not cross-questioning in the middle of what I'm saying. And each time India and Pakistan try to get together to resolve the issue and start talks, India comes up with some ridiculous argument and either cancels those talks or refuses to talk. Now,
so
if
you
that
have no
is
agenda
the attitude of such a big country, such a country with perhaps the second largest population in the world, which is trying to prove to the world that it should be taken on as a permanent member of the Security Council, a country which is unfair and unjust. How can we expect anything good from our neighbor when you refuse to talk?
Sir, General Qureshi, you see this hyper-provocative position that Pakistan has taken vis-a-vis India in New York. You know what? Every seasoned observer we speak to makes one observation, and Maruf can expound on it, that this does not fit into the narrative of any country or show the characteristics of any country which is interested in pursuing a stable bilateral relationship with its neighbor.
Yeah,
that's you know, and that's the sense of disappointment. Let me tell you this: in New York today, General Rashid Qureshi, Everyone, when you mention Pakistan, there is just one sentiment everyone shares with you. And that sentiment is that we are so deeply disappointed with Pakistan. And when you do this ahead of your Prime Minister speaking at the UNGA, you may be appealing to Imran Khan, but you disappoint the entire world. Maruf wanted to respond to you. Maruf, go ahead, please.
General Sahab, first, I think the world is expecting some new ideas from Pakistan. And in the absence of which, it is understandable to some extent that Mr. Nawaz Sharif would have raised the Kashmir issue, primarily because, as we've seen in the last couple of months, his initial desire to have good relations with India and not rake up the Kashmir issue, even when he came in for Mr. Modi's swearing in, and he set aside any meeting with the Hurriyat Council members, which eventually led to the calling off of the talks, showed that he wanted to take a different path. But clearly there are forces within Pakistan, and you know those forces that are there, the establishment, which want
who
to
Nawaz
see,
Sharif is playing to.
Nawaz Sharif has come under huge amount of pressure, and he's had to change course now, because that is the line that he is expected to take in the absence of any other ideas. I think the more important issue, General Sahab, that we need to bring out is Pakistan now only going to talk to itself, even at a forum like the United Nations, where the world is waiting for a new set of ideas? It is you who, in various shows of ours, have always argued that you are a bigger victim of terror than virtually anybody else. Why aren't you talking about attending to the terror-related threat that your own society faces? Our problem, you say that Kashmir is the biggest issue between the two of us. The biggest issue for us is cross-border terror sponsored from your end. What about talking about that?
Yeah, you know, let's go to Shuja Nawaz, please, and Michael Kugelman there in our studios in Washington. I'm sure Rashid Qureshi would like to respond to you, Maruf, very quickly. Sir, General Qureshi, I know you are eager to respond. I just want you to get the perspective from New York. We'll keep bringing you back to the discussion. Let everyone come into it. You provoke us 3 times. General Qureshi, just putting this in perspective for our guests in New York as well. India's view is we've been provoked 3 times. One, when the Pakistan High Commissioner says the mastermind of 2611 is a free man, and he can go around wherever he wants to go. Second provocation, rewind to a day before August 18th, when India warned Islamabad that should their High Commissioner meet the separatists, then the talks at the Foreign Secretary level will be called off. Yet the Foreign Secretary level talks happen. And third time now, Shuja Nawaz, the question goes to you. The third provocation is that on the brink of Modi landing in New York, Sartaj Aziz goes on and on and on about how India overreacted by calling off the talks. Now, do you think the international community will blame India for calling off the talks, or look into the reasons why India called off the talks? Shuja Nawaz.
I don't think the international community is going to get involved in any blame game on this issue. There is much more on their plate at the UN, as well as in their multilateral and bilateral forums, especially dealing with the Middle East and the global terrorism issue, which seems to have seized their imaginations. In Washington in particular, you have to keep in mind that Congress is basically out. It is now on the campaign trail waiting for the midterm elections. And this is what the president and his party are concentrating on also. So except for emergencies, I doubt that there will be a great deal of attention paid to anything happening in a distant corner of the world, particularly
so
in
Shuja
South
Nawaz, from your analysis, I get a sense that therefore you would also agree with me that Nawaz Sharif is only playing to a domestic constituency out there.
Well, I think both countries owe it to themselves and to their people to resolve their differences. So it's not a question of playing to the gallery. I think the people of India and Pakistan now demand that they have strongly elected leaders, and that it's time that they delivered on the question of peace in the region. This is also tied to domestic economic development. Both countries have been on an economic downslide. It makes no sense for them to get involved in blaming each other or getting into a war of words when they need to concentrate on creating jobs at home.
I agree with you, Shuja Nawaz, which basically brings us to the moot point. If this is what you're saying, Shuja Nawaz, is not something unknown to Nawaz Sharif. And I'm sure that the Pakistani diplomats would also have told him that the situation right now globally is not one where anyone's going to seriously listen to you. I'd just like to place before you, and as I go to Michael Kugelman, I get your perspective. People in Washington, Michael, I'm sure, are interested in other issues. There is ISIS, there is the global threat to terror. If Pakistan talks about how it's going to step up to the plate on actually fighting terrorism, I think it would find more takers than if it were to go on about the Kashmir issue. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's put things in perspective. The U.S. government just declared another war in the Middle East against ISIS. So that's going to be the priority. That's going to be the focus, the policy debate. It's all going to revolve around things like that. Certainly, I think that with the U.S. and the international combat role in Afghanistan winding down, I think that tension in this town on Pakistan will not necessarily go away or disappear, but I think there'll be much less of an interest in pursuing a deeper, open-faceted relationship with it. So there's not really going to be I don't think there's going to be quite as much engagement as there has been during these war years with U.S. forces in Afghanistan. But bottom line, I absolutely agree with Shuja Nawaz. The international community is really not going to be taking up this Kashmir issue, and certainly the U.S. government has so many other things on its plate now that it really sees this as something that's being played out between Pakistan and India, and certainly there's a strong desire here for some sort of agreement or something like that, but I think the realization here is that is not at all a realistic prospect anytime soon.
Yes, but from both Michael, what you're saying and what Shuja Nawaz is saying, if I hear you correctly, there are other issues that are there before the international community right now, especially before the White House. Therefore, when Nawaz Sharif comes here, and Rashid Qureshi, I hope you're listening to these two gentlemen, you see. I know that there is a hawkish community out there in Pakistan which would only like to hear Kashmir, 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 and pretend and imagine and live in its own imaginary construct that the whole world is thinking about Kashmir. But these gentlemen bring to you another perspective today, Rashid Qureshi, that the world has really moved on. And it is completely naive to think that the government of Pakistan can come to the world stage and pretend to the international community that it was India's fault that talks were called off. Given the fact that it is a well-known fact, we gave you warnings, that Narendra Modi gave you warnings that the talks will be called off if you speak to the separatists. So you're making your domestic constituencies happy. But what you're getting as a result of that, Rashid Qureshi, is you're being really, this line is on deaf ears. It's water off a duck's back. Nobody's taking you seriously on these issues anymore. Let's go across to Stephen Luibo. Stephen, what do you think about this? The world is too concerned about other issues to really take Nawaz Sharif seriously.
I would put it a little bit differently, but on the same issue. Kashmir is incredibly important, but not for the reasons we're talking about. It's easy to be trapped. The arguments, the geopolitical arguments of the last century. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was not out in the streets, last week, over Kashmir. He wasn't out in the streets over terrorism.
Yes.
He was out in the streets because there were 400,000 people outside that window who were concerned about climate change. And Kashmir is at the center of this, but it's Kashmir as it's connected to the Sandy that helped destroy a good chunk of this city. It is what just happened in the Philippines. I mean, the real issue is not really people from India or Kashmir, but what really occupied Kashmir, which was massive amounts of water. I mean, I was particularly struck. The biggest accomplishment, this incredibly exciting thing that India did in the last week. They sent, as we all know, this ship to Mars. Why does anybody care about Mars? Mars is a planet that used to have water and used to have air, and we're trying to figure out what happened. Those are the core issues of the 21st century.
So you're saying that when somebody comes here and picks up the issue of Kashmir and picks up the issue of sort of India, we called off the talks, who called off the talks, it's not really going to be listened to seriously.
What I'm saying quite simply is the world is concerned about something enormously bigger and larger. Kashmir is not much older than Kashmir, but Pakistan and India are much older than I am. But this core issue of whether people have enough food and water, and those are the core issues of the 21st century. I was very disappointed, frankly, that Prime Minister Modi arrived after the climate talks. Because if India is going to be in the 21st century leading, you have to be leading on the issue that people care about.
My takeaway from what you're saying, Dr. Libo, is actually buttresses my same point. You get a sense that, Rashid Qureshi, please hear the reality. You can choose to be blind today, you can choose to be deaf. Now, everyone around the table can't be wrong. And it's not just that the hawks in Pakistan are right. You are being left out, and nobody really is going to listen to you when you go around about the same old blame game that India called off the talks. The world is a stake with India. The world's only stake with Pakistan is a compulsion that it has been an untrustworthy partner in the war on terror, which also is not going to stay with you for very long. Mahesh Jethmalani, what would you say to Rashid Qureshi? You know, there is a group in Pakistan which is very gung-ho. I'm sure, you know, today all over Pakistani television, Pakistan radio, all the state channels and the other channels is the news that there went our Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and spoke about Kashmir and told Ban Ki-moon no compromise. Do you think, Mahesh, that even the people of Pakistan will take Nawaz Sharif seriously now, let alone India or the international community?
No, Arnab, it's quite clear from what all the previous guests have said that this is really an attempt at appeasing a domestic constituency right now, because it's going to fall on deaf ears in the United States, given their several other concerns globally. But you know, I'm not even so sure that the Pakistanis themselves are convinced about this. I mean, the real reason why they've done this is because of pressure from the army. And I suspect one of the strongest reasons why this is being raised right now is because of the popularity of the army in the recent flood relief. I think Pakistan is compelled to do it to again spread disaffection against India and its army through its position on Kashmir. The army right now has got a lot of kudos from the people in Kashmir, and people connected with Pakistan, the Hurriyat and separatists, have on the contrary been seen and perceived to be playing an extremely destructive role by making uncharitable and perverse remarks about the army efforts in Jammu and Kashmir. So it's a domestic constituency problem, and Pakistan is losing goodwill, and the Indian army and the Indian nation and Indian people are gaining a lot of goodwill in Kashmir. Now, one of the speakers, I think it was Shuja Nawaz, who said that peace, of course, peace is desirable in the neighborhood, and all countries must desire peace, particularly with their neighbors. But the fact of the matter is that every time it is Pakistan that vitiates peace talks. I mean, it's not a question, it's always a question of chicken and egg, but they create the provocation. Whether it is terror, whether it is encouraging people like Hafiz Syed and Yassin Malik, or whether it is giving a venue and a platform to Al-Zawahiri, the Al-Qaeda chief, to abuse India and undermine India's sovereignty, it is always them that vitiate any chance for talks with or without Kashmir.
Rashid Qureshi, in fact, there is a strange and bittersweet irony that I feel many observers will also consider at this moment. And that is that just 1 year back, Shuja Nawaz and Michael Kugelman, 1 year back, I'd like to throw back to Washington. 1 year back, Nawaz Sharif came, freshly scrubbed and a freshly elected Prime Minister of Pakistan. And what did he say before the UNGA? He said, I stand here before you once again as a result of a successful democratic experiment in Pakistan. And almost half his speech, Shuja Nawaz, went into talking about how the democratic forces in Pakistan are back to play and how they should be strengthened. Now we view, and when I say we, Shuja Nawaz, I must clarify that this is an Indian position, even though I bring this broadcast to you from New York. Our perspective is that Pakistan today, Nawaz Sharif has his hands tied. And had Nawaz Sharif had a free hand, Shuja Nawaz, he perhaps would not have gone on about the K word, he wouldn't have done these three-step provocation, Sartaj Aziz wouldn't have said what he had, and Kashmir and the calling or not calling off of the talks would not have been the only issue. The feeling is in India that he's really speaking general, your general's language rather than his own. You agree with that, Shuja Nawaz and Michael Kugelman, that Nawaz Sharif is more a puppet in the army's hands, even when he struts around in New York?
Arnab, let me correct a little bit of your historical memory on Nawaz Sharif. Nawaz Sharif has always been a very strong proponent of Pakistan's position on Kashmir, when he was in the opposition as well as when he was in the government. So everyone was looking to him now and to Prime Minister Modi, both of whom were seen as hawks. And this is the other point I want to correct. There are only hawks in Pakistan, according to your point of view. I think there are hawks on both sides, and it doesn't help matters when the hawks get the ascendant position and the voice. Secondly, Nawaz Sharif is not the only politician in Pakistan that has fixated on Kashmir as an unresolved issue. More recently, you may recall there was a controversy over Bilawal Bhutto making a very inflammatory speech about Kashmir before his domestic audience. So there will always be this remaining irksome problem between the two countries, what we were hoping for after the election of Prime Minister Modi and the invitation to the neighboring states' heads of government to come to Delhi, that there would be a new beginning and that some of the issues that needed to be resolved could be resolved,
of course
including
it could
on
have.
trade.
No, of course it could have, Shuja Nawaz.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Of course it could have. But what we're saying to you and our perspective is that there has been political instability in Pakistan in the last few months. There have been widespread anti-government protests. There have been allegations that the Pakistani Prime Minister was rigging the previous general elections. They came to the limelight. Imran Khan on the one hand. So there is a domestic compulsion angle. I mean, I don't know, what you're saying, that there are hawks on both sides, but there are more hawks right now pushing Nawaz Sharif to take a more strident position. I don't think he's going to be able to go back in one piece to Islamabad if he doesn't go very strident now on Kashmir, on calling off the talks and on increasing the blame game, because there's really no other takeaway that he has from New York.
The reality is that he cannot solve Kashmir on his own. He has to give his people more food and clothing and shelter.
Sure he
has to give them energy.
I'm sure he has, but he has no solution on that. Shuja Nawaz, he has no solution on that. So the only thing that he can go back with is that I made a strong comment on Kashmir, and maybe to hope that that's going to be played up by the local media and keep his critics at bay for at least some time. Maruf wanted to respond to you. Yes.